In 1936, a major European power systematically unleashed chemical weapons on tens of thousands of African civilians, burning them alive from the inside out. Hospitals and Red Cross ambulances were bombed to make sure the wounded couldn't get help. This wasn't some dark secret, it was a state-sanctioned genocide, approved at the highest levels of government. You've never heard this story because it was buried for 90 years. Italian aircraft appeared over Ethiopian villages at dawn, releasing yellow clouds that drifted down like deadly rain. The cattle collapsed first, foaming at the mouth. Then the children started coughing blood. Survivors, interviewed decades later, recalled the horror. "We thought it was fog from the mountains, but when the animals began foaming at the mouth, we knew something terrible had come." Over 18 months, Italian forces conducted over 60 documented chemical attacks across Ethiopia. They poisoned ancient wells, contaminated entire valleys, and turned the air itself into a weapon of mass destruction. This is the story of the most documented chemical warfare campaign of the 20th century, and how its cover-up created the blueprint for every atrocity that followed. This is how Ethiopia stood alone against fascist terror, saved the evidence, and ultimately survived to expose the truth, even when the world's most powerful nations conspired to bury it forever. To understand the savagery that followed, we need to rewind 4 decades to 1896. As European powers carved up Africa in the scramble for Africa, the Kingdom of Italy faced a military disaster that would scar its national pride for a generation. At the Battle of Adwa, a modern Italian army was decisively crushed by Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II. Over 7,000 Italian soldiers died in a single day. It was an unheard-of victory for an African nation and a deep humiliation for Italy that the country never forgot. Fast forward to 1922. Benito Mussolini and his fascist party were in power. He made one thing clear: Ethiopia would pay for that defeat. This wasn't just about empire, it was personal revenge against the only African nation that had successfully resisted European domination. It was personal, it was unfinished business. Ethiopian intelligence networks that had served Menelik II watched Italian military build-up throughout the early 1930s. Ethiopian diplomats traveled to European capitals, warning of Italian preparations for invasion. They presented evidence to the League of Nations, hoping international law might protect them. Ethiopian leaders understood Italian intentions, but believed the post-World War I international order would prevent another European war of conquest. They were catastrophically wrong. On October 3, 1935, without declaring war, Mussolini's armies invaded from 2 directions. General Emilio de Bono attacked from Eritrea in the north. General Rodolfo Graziani advanced from Italian Somaliland in the south. Over 400,000 Italian and colonial troops would eventually pour into Ethiopia, supported by 600 aircraft, hundreds of tanks, and modern artillery. Emperor Haile Selassie's army, though incredibly brave, was outgunned. His soldiers were mostly armed with old rifles and traditional weapons. The entire Ethiopian Air Force had fewer than 15 planes. The technological gap was staggering, but Ethiopian commanders like Ras Mulugeta and Ras Kassa had learned from Adwa. They developed guerrilla tactics that frustrated Italian advances. Ethiopian forces knew every mountain pass, every seasonal water source, every cave system. They would strike Italian supply lines and vanish into terrain no European army could navigate. Ethiopian resistance was so effective that by December 1935, the Italian offensive had stalled completely. Frustrated and impatient for quick, crushing victory, Mussolini made a decision that would define this conflict. In encrypted telegrams to his commanders, he authorized the use of all available means to achieve victory. Italian military archives, declassified in the 1990s, reveal exactly what this meant. On December 15, 1935, the first shipment arrived at Massawa port, 350 tons of mustard gas in artillery shells and aerial spray tanks. Italy was about to test whether the world really meant what it had signed in the 1925 Geneva Protocol banning chemical weapons. What you're witnessing is just the beginning of one of history's most shocking war crimes. If stories like this, the untold truths of African resistance and colonial brutality, matter to you, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Because what happens next will show you exactly why powerful nations still get away with targeting civilians today. With Mussolini's direct blessing, the first chemical attack came on December 23, 1935, over the Takazi Valley. Italian engineers had fitted their aircraft with special spraying equipment, allowing them to poison 20 square kilometers in a single flight. What Haile Selassie would later call a fine, death-dealing rain. Mustard gas is a nightmare weapon. It burns the skin, eyes, and lungs, causing horrific blisters and blindness. For Ethiopian soldiers who often fought barefoot or in sandals, the effect was catastrophic. But this chemical war wasn't confined to battlefields. Italian specialists studied Ethiopian hydrology, mapping seasonal water flows and identifying wells that served multiple communities. These became primary targets. The strategy was calculated: contaminate the resources that communities depended on, force entire populations to abandon their ancestral lands, and break the will of the people. On March 4, 1936, Italian aircraft attacked the town of Quoram on market day, when thousands of people gathered to trade. The planes, flying in formation, released yellow clouds over the crowded marketplace. People ran in all directions as the yellow poison followed them. Children collapsed first, then women carrying babies. By evening, over 1,700 people were dead. But the Italians went further. In flagrant violation of the Geneva Conventions, Italian pilots were ordered to attack Red Cross ambulances and field hospitals. The goal was to make escape or medical aid nearly impossible. Dr. Marcel Junod of the International Red Cross arrived in February 1936 and documented what he found. Patients presented severe burns across their entire bodies. Eyes were swollen completely shut, skin covered with blisters and ulcers. Many died within hours of respiratory failure. The scale of the horror was unprecedented. Meanwhile, the international community that claimed to stand for justice was about to reveal its true face. This is only half the story. What you've seen is horrifying. But what comes next will show you how Ethiopians fought back against impossible odds, how they preserved the truth when the world tried to bury it, and why this 90-year-old cover-up still shapes how civilians are targeted today. Hit that like button if this story shocked you, share it with someone who needs to know this history, and subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of untold African history that mainstream documentaries refuse to touch. See you in part 2.